or forfeiting our interests.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
How can I convince you when your ears refuse to hear? You turn your heart away from me each time when I draw near. Your eyes refuse to meet with mine, they glance away in fear.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
Well, it's just a show. How can I contain this anguish and this pain? Knowing that your eyes are blinded by the lies.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger wells inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to tear the moon out of the sky and drop the sun.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas, and I'm proud to tell you that I am on a number of veterans networks. I do have my VA card, and Veterans Truth. My apologies for you listening on Veterans Truth. For yesterday, we just had a little trouble hooking up, but started early today, and we got everybody hooked up. And my guest today is Mark Elsis. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Alrighty, Clayton. Thank you once again for having me back on to discuss my piece, American Exceptionalism. I appreciate it.
It's a very good piece, and just a quote from it, from the first paragraph or two. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Do you know who he was, or where he came from?
No, I don't know his background very much. I believe it was German, but beside that, I'm not sure.
He said, none are so hopelessly enslaved as those who falsely believe they are free. The truth has been kept from the depths of their minds by masters who rule them with lies. They feed them on falsehoods till wrong looks like right in their eyes. I have heard the first sentence there many times, but I hadn't followed up on that, and I mean, that really describes what's going on with our television, our radio broadcast, our news broadcast, our newspapers. At the turn of the century, at the press club, one gentleman said, we can't print the truth. We can't print the truth. And you say, I've realized the astonishing disconnect that the vast majority of United States citizens have from reality for a long time, so much so that for the last few years I've been compiling an ever-expanding list of what is known as American exceptionalism. An overwhelming amount of the citizens in the United States still think they live in the greatest country on earth, a republic based on democratic principles with a Bill of Rights that protects their civil liberties. The cold, hard facts are that despite some stirring phrases without much binding force, the ultimate concern of the United States Constitution is the protection of property, private property, and wealth at the very top against the masses, therefore making any chance of a legitimate democratic reversal impossible. Why do you think 55 of our rich founding fathers convened in secret and wrote the United States Constitution behind locked doors that were protected by armed guards? The land of the free and home of the brave, and apple pie and Chevrolet is morphed into a game theory chaos with absolute dictatorial control and unprecedented profits, where the collective is trying to assimilate us to believe that resistance is futile. It isn't. And I think that is the key phrase here. You know, too many of us have the idea, I'm just one man. What can I do? I'm just a little guy here. I'm just a peon. I can't go up against the way things have always been. I don't believe that.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, is the apathy that has prevailed. You know, possibly, or I don't know exactly when it started, but it's been instilled in us to believe this way, against our, of course, own better goodness. And maybe it started on November 22nd, 1963. And because, you know, we didn't step up when our president was assassinated, and we just let it be. And then, you know, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy and on John Lennon and on about the assassinations, and there is a purveying message of that it's hopeless, and people somehow believe that it is hopeless, and therefore they don't try, and they say, you know, the whole thing, you can't fight City Hall type of thing. And this, of course, is, if you believe this, then that will come true. So to me, you know, I mean, for almost all my life I have not believed that, and I have tried to do as much as possible to show the truth as best I can in historical ways and very factual ways. And in American exceptionalism, I began noticing, you know, a long time ago, but I started compiling a list of what ended up being 50 different ways that the American dream has turned into a nightmare a few years ago. And because what it comes down to is people, not only that they're hoodwinked into believing that it's hopeless, but they're hoodwinked in the same vein to believe that America is the greatest country on earth, and that, you know, we're the best at everything. And so it's an interesting sort of dichotomy that it's hopeless, but we're the best at hopeless. And, you know, it's sort of like the majority of people in the United States are Christian. And I always found it very strange that people that call themselves Christians, you know, want to go out and foment wars and go to wars and you know, go against thou shalt not kill. And lately it's gotten even worse and worse. You would think it would be getting better because people would understand more about that, you know, war is a racket, as Smiley Butler has said, 80 years ago now. And, you know, he should know that he was he went in and did the wars for the corporations. So
yeah, and the first Bush, let me add too, that George Bush's grandfather, Prescott Bush, was part of the rebellion trying to set up a fascist system here in America, and Smedley stopped him cold. Almost makes you appreciate Roosevelt a little bit, because he was on the other side. And isn't that what happens? You know, I've said that in my last article, Mark, that I want to prevent what happened to the Russians. You know, they murdered 60 million white Christian Russians. I want to prevent that from happening to America. And they did the same thing in Germany. They financed the Jacob Schiff and the bankers financed both sides of the same conflict. Germany didn't want a war with England. Germany kept from bombing England. Germany was not our enemy. You know, my whole family was German. My family was Wolfs from Germany. And they settled right here in Texas.
Yeah, that's where my surname comes from also, Alsace-Lorraine, which is German France. For the last 400 years, they've been going back and forth. It's, yeah, Germany for sure got set up to go into war. I mean, it's just and they seem to want to do almost the same thing to Russia with the Ukraine. It was almost the same MO, but Putin sort of didn't fall for all the shenanigans and killing of people in the Ukraine, especially the eastern part of the Ukraine.
Isn't it possible the Zionists, the Jews, the Bolsheviks, whatever you want to call them, whatever name they're hiding under now, they killed over 11 million in the Ukraine, starved them to death. That's like starving 11 million people in Kansas. The Ukraine was, you know, the producer of wheat and food for all of Russia. And they murdered 11 million of them. And it also rests, and I've got a whole article I'm going to do one day here when I don't have a guest, on the whole Bolshevik Zionist plot. The Rothschilds, you know, who were German. They were German. Yeah, somebody said to me, well, Clay, you said the Rothschilds were Jewish. I thought they were German. Well, they were. But that doesn't, they were also part of this Khazarian mafia that, and they're trying to take Khazaria back, Mark. The Ukraine and Georgia are right there where the Jews came from. And all of your Ashkenazi Jews, let that be a clue to you folks. Hitler did not like the term Nazi. He didn't use it. The National Socialists didn't use that. That was created by the Jews who were manipulating the media and tried to turn Americans against the Germans.
Yeah, I mean it's a pejorative that people don't recognize because it's been used. You know, they don't call them Germans; they call them, you know, evil Nazis, and it's just because that the Jews own, you know, from when they first took over the Federal Reserve in 1913, and they got more and more power over our country. They had the plan to buy the most influential papers in the beginning, because they figured, well, if we can get the influential papers, then the other papers will more easily follow suit. And then, you know, as they got more and more power over the financial, through the Depression and all these different kinds of shenanigans, they expanded it out. And of course, when radio came in, you know, around 1920, they jumped onto the radio. And in 27, I think it was, they passed the radio frequencies, and they got the frequencies of most radio stations in the country, and they did the same thing with television, and they stole the motion pictures pretty much from Edison, who sort of stole them from other people, and then they ran out west to start Hollywood. And so they've realized the power of communications quite well, and they've manipulated it to manipulate us. And that's what this document is partially about, is that the manipulation of us. And these small group of people, around 0.2% of the world's population, less than 2% of the United States' population, and I'm not saying all Jews, but the vast majority of all communication is in Jewish hands, and this has been for the longest time. This is what I say to people when they say about John Kennedy. I said, well, they covered it up very well, because who controlled the media to put out the narrative that it was that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin with and who put forth the lone bullet theory was all Inspector and 4 of the Jews.
Oh, he hated me, by the way, just as an aside. When I was working in the presidential race in 1996, I was supporting Charles Collins. I was his driver, his bodyguard, and his speechwriter, multitasking to the max. And every time they would cut his microphone off in 2 or 3 venues, just actually cut it off right in the middle of a speech, so Americans never knew that Charles Collins was telling them they could buy back the Federal Reserve. We'd go into a Republican meeting. I'd put up Collins posters all over the place. The next morning, when the television cameras turned on, there wasn't a Collins poster anywhere between the Doles and the Pat Buchanan and Alan Keyes. Their posters were up. Charles Collins wasn't. And when Specter got up and started talking,
he became a made man because of what he did with the Kennedy assassination.
I'd walk down the hall and say, Ireland, hey, tell us about that magic bullet, Ireland.
Yeah, it's this is how it happens, and I've spoken this before, and I'm still writing my major piece on John F. Kennedy's assassination, but that is one of the major smoking guns that I've come up with, is that everybody knows the Warren Commission, but the people behind the Warren Commission, there were 28 members, and I went through each member of the Warren Commission, all of these lawyers that were actually doing the work, and at least 16 out of the 28 were Jewish. There's 2 that
sound like Nuremberg. Sound like the rigged Nuremberg trials.
It's exactly the same thing. That's where I got the idea from the rigged Nuremberg trials, from Dodd, who was second in command at the Nuremberg trials, saying that, telling the Jews, paraphrasing here, but he told the Jews, and he was trying to help them, saying, hey, why don't you people back off, because you're like 75% of what's going on here behind the scenes, and don't you think the historians are going to look back on this and see a conflict of interest? That's what hit my consciousness, and I know that because of my work in Holocaust revisionism, and all of a sudden, like 2 years ago, out of the blue, it said, go look behind the scene of John F. Kennedy's assassination. And I gave that to a mathematics professor, and it was something like 19 quadrillion to 1 odds that would happen. And anyway, and Arlen Specter and Redlich and 3 other Jewish members of the Warren Commission staff, or lawyers, came up with the single bullet theory. And I have it in quotes in Vincent Begalussi's book. I mean, so you have 5 Jewish lawyers coming up with a single magic bullet theory to blame Oswald, and then it's perpetrated. Back to my original part, it's perpetrated in de facto in the Jewish media. That is back in 1963, wholly owned by Jews.
You might, I suppose, in your book, you do make mention of the fact that our Vice President, Lyndon Baines Johnson, that traitorous Texan, he was a supporter of the Jews. He was responsible for the USS Liberty debacle, and he also, according to his lawyer, who I interviewed, said he was involved with or behind or responsible for Kennedy's assassination. And the first thing he did on that Air Force One after he took the oath of office was to recall all of the money Kennedy issued in Executive Order 11-11-0.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that LBJ, who killed many people, including his own sister, was the person that was behind it. I think that he was an accessory after the fact. I think that he found out, I believe he found out the night before at the meeting at Murchison's house, where Hoover and Nixon and many top-level officials and banking officials were. And I believe he got the news that night, and he just went along with it. But things changed, like you said correctly, right away, all in favor of Israel and the Jewish financiers. And so it's in LBJ was he's just you know, a lot of people think that perhaps him and his wife Lady Bird were possibly were Jewish. I don't know that for sure, but they're from that area of Texas where there's a lot of Sephardic Jews and blah blah blah. But he was backed by, you know, the Brown brothers, Kellogg Brown and Root, and so, you know, and what he did in '48, the '48 election after he lost the '42 senatorial election, what he did in '48 with and Connolly was his campaign manager, who of course was in the seat with Kennedy and got hit, and yeah, so it's and the amazing thing about Johnson, by the way, since we're going off on this tangent sort of, is that you know, he got into the Senate in '48 crookedly, but by the time in '54 he was the leader of the Senate. Now, this never happens. It's never happened in the Senate that a one-term senator takes total control and becomes the majority leader of the Senate. This just never happens. And when I was doing my investigation for this piece that I'm going to be putting out on the 100th birthday of John F. Kennedy on May 29th, 2017, I'm going to put it on November 1963.com, and I found out, you know, a lot of this, all this background information, and you know, he's also the one that came up with the taxing of the churches and that whole debacle. So I mean, he was and he was quite the he's quite the vulgar guy. I mean, there's many instances of him with sexual things that were just very strange, and he would intimidate people a lot, and because he had the defense contractors behind him, and so it's and he never even thought that Kennedy was going to win the nomination in '60 anyway. It goes, you know, it's an amazing thing, but he did have a definite hand in the assassination to help cover it up, and like I said, an accessory after the fact, more or less, and Hoover also, and as well as many others. And I believe the major liaison with the whole Kennedy thing was one James Jesus Angleton. He was the liaison between the Israel and our intelligence community. If anybody doesn't know Angleton, he was head of counterintelligence for the CIA, and also he was in charge of liaison with the Warren Commission from the CIA, and so it's and he helped start the Mossad, it's just a real shady character, Angleton, and he has 2 plaques over in Israel to him. So I think it ran pretty much through Angleton that got our people, and our people, of course, you know, the Curtises of the world and all these people, they were.
Mark, you should know.
Out of their minds. The whole Joint Chiefs of Staff. But, what's that?
You should know that I was 17 years old, living over there in Fort Worth. But my friend, who was in my first motorcycle club with me, that was called the Ghost Riders out of Euless, Texas. We called it Useless, Texas. He was sitting on the railroad bridge over Elm and saw 2 riflemen shoot Kennedy. His name was Galen Dougherty. We called him Box. And Box became a bandito and was a bandito on the day he died on his motorcycle in Dallas. Maybe after he had told me about this, that was fairly strange because I never put his name out. I never told anybody about that. I gave him hell about it. I said, Box, you know who I am. You know what I do. You're just now telling me this, that you saw the people shoot Kennedy after 40 years? How come you didn't tell me sooner? He said, I wanted to live.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, they took out well over 100 people that were, including Dorothy Kilgannon, perhaps the top woman writer in this country. Not only took her out, but she gave her manuscript. And she was the only person to interview Jacob Rubenstein, a.k.a. Jack Ruby. And she gave her manuscript to her best friend, and her best friend, she got killed, and her best friend got killed, both, I believe, within 24 hours of each other. So they didn't, you know, they cleaned up after the fact very well, including, of course, the first murder ever seen live on television, with Jacob Rubenstein killing Lee Harvey Oswald. So it's 2 days after the assassination. So it was a very, you know, that in and of itself, of course, tells you who was behind it. You know, it's just the amount of evidence is by the way, is staggering. Not only that your friend, but there was, I can't recall his name, but there was a deaf man on the overpass, where you're talking, and he saw the people also shoot Kennedy from the grassy knoll area behind the fence, and he's a very good witness, as well as, you know, I mean, Kennedy, there was most likely four groups of mechanics shooting at him, so and he was hit quite a few times. You know, one went right through the windshield into his throat, one into his back, 2 into his head. So I mean, it was a coup d'état in broad daylight, and the amazing thing also, I mean, there's a million amazing things, but you know, like the first rifle. Here we go getting into Kennedy, but the first rifle was found wasn't the rifle that later on, the Mannlicher Carcano, which was ID'd, you know, Oswald bought, but there's no record of him ever buying it, by the way, through the postal system and all that kind of thing. But the first rifle was found was a Mauser, German-made Mauser, which is a rather good rifle. And then I found, real interesting, when it came up in the 90s, this got released, and some lady, Mary something or other, found it in an envelope that said 7.65 Mauser, found, I believe it was December 2nd, 1963, in Dealey Plaza, and it said that it had the bullet of it, and that they threw it away because it wasn't needed. So not many people know what I've just said, very few people, matter of fact, that the first rifle that was found, and it was said by Walter Cronkite and everybody, what's his name? The Dallas policeman who they later tried to kill 3 times and they finally got.
Tippit.
I always forget. No. Tippit got killed that day. This is what's his name? Oh, I always forget it. Anyway, he's a real. Anyway, but he was there when they found this Mauser, and that was the gun, the first rifle that was found, and then you find a bullet. I think it was 1992, 1993 or something when some of the stuff was opened up, that a 7.65 Mauser bullet was found on December 2nd in Dealey Plaza, and it's like, whoa. So and then they switched it off, and the frame up of Oswald was what it was. It was a frame up. I mean, it's just, and everything working together. I mean, we had at that time Operation Northwoods, and Operation Northwoods was a false flag written up and okayed by every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This was to try to invade Cuba with painting our planes or bombing ships, and all different false flag ways that we could blame on Cuba and go into Cuba. And like I said, I believe all 5 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff okayed this, including Curtis LeMay at the time, who despised Kennedy. Matter of fact, he walked out one of the meetings and said, "We're going to get this guy." And so the defense establishment was against him. I mean, anybody that's listening should go listen to Kennedy's speech at the American University, the peace speech. It was of June 10th, 1963, and it is his greatest speech. It's phenomenal, and he saw the light. I mean, he was a Cold Warrior, and he changed, and he saw the light with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And behind the scenes, I've talked about this once on your show, but it's utmost important since we're down this road now, is that through Pope John Paul, the 23rd it was, he had a liaison with Khrushchev and a backdoor channel through the Vatican. And because of this, the people around Khrushchev were just as crazy as the people like our George Chiefs of Staff who just wanted war. And you had, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were on the brink of annihilation, or partial annihilation of our species. And these 2 men stopped it. It was Kennedy who didn't want to escalate. And when everybody around him, all his military and most of his advisors, just said, we have them. Let's do them. And we didn't even know that there were submarines that were going to Cuba at the time that had nuclear tipped missiles on them. And I forget the name of one of the captains of these submarines, but we were throwing depth charges and stuff at them when we were circling them, and they were under strict orders if they come attack to shoot them with the nuclear tipped torpedoes. And they needed, I believe, all 3 members of the submarine crew, and he didn't do it. And so this guy also, with Kennedy and Khrushchev, saved the day, because if this guy, of course, let go of that torpedo, that would have been, Kennedy would have had it would have escalated, and we're talking most likely hundreds of millions of people dead. And so it's amazing that this man in that instance, when it was, what's really amazing is that during 1960, when he's running for president, he's of course the only Roman Catholic that ever became president, and I was Roman Catholic. I went to school early, and I was in first grade when it happened. And so, but they came, and the dig against him was, are you going to follow our Constitution, or are you going to follow the Vatican? Who's your leader? And they were trying to derail him through that way. And so, but it's really strange that because of the Vatican, because of his backdoor channel, he had an open communication and became almost friendly with Khrushchev. And the men had a certain trust of each other. That's why Khrushchev backed off. Khrushchev
let me stop you there for a second, because I think I have said that the whole Cold War was another false flag. It was a false flag. The Russians have never been our enemy, ever. The Russian government, the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, the Jews, they start the wars and then they fund both sides. And they funded the Soviet Union, made a lot of money off of it, and then it was the Jews that gave the Soviet Union the atomic secrets from.
Yes.
You know, my God, I mean, all the evidence is there. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. This is Hollywood. This is the Jewish Hollywood, and they've done the same thing with trying to make people like me into the bad guys. The militia's coming. These guys are militia. Let's send Steven Seagal after them. He'll kick their ass. He'll kick their ass. I mean, this is Hollywood trying to, and now they're doing the same thing to the bikers. I won't let a show go by that I don't bring up Waco 2 here. That it was the murder of 17 little children and their families that put me on this path, that started the Free American, that started the militia, that started this radio show, and Waco 2. These are my brothers, man. My club, first club, the Ghost Riders out of Useless, Texas, became the Banditos. My friend that I told you about, Galen Dougherty, his name was Fox. He was a Bandito. And I happened to do time in Texas for marijuana. Never robbed, never stole, but I damn sure smoked some marijuana. And I did time with Don Chambers, Mother Chambers, at Cofield Prison. So I feel particularly fond of the Banditos, and I'm glad only one of them was killed in the police set-up massacre at the Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco. If you've got any thoughts on that, you can. I'd love to hear it, but that's it. That's all I got to say about the matter for right now.
I found it very disturbing because it just seemed, the first article I looked at had 9 people dead and I think 17, 18 injured, and I was like, it's why are these people fighting amongst themselves like this? And there was supposed to be a few different groups there, and there were a lot of wives and girlfriends there, and then I read another article that came out like 3 or 4 days later that said that there were all of these police there, and that then it came out subsequently that you had automatic gunfire. And they didn't find any automatic weapons. They said they did. They said they found an automatic weapon amongst the bikers, but it was locked in a car. So who had the automatic weapons that were firing?
Only the police. And listen, I've published 2 biker magazines over the last 30 years, and I've covered hundreds of these events. It doesn't happen. We don't take guns into the restaurants. We don't take guns into the bars. Right. And there was no biker war there. Yeah, they had some differences. Yeah, there might have been a punch thrown. But they wouldn't have opened up because, as you said, the wives are there, the children are there. My children have gone. My sons went with me to every event that I covered.
Right, that's not going to happen there, right. It's just, and the thing that's really disturbing me is that they're prolonging well, first of all, they're
$1 million bond.
Everybody. With the bonds on everybody, that they're try to keep everybody shut up so they can't say the stories, and the autopsy results. Well, what takes forever to get the autopsy results out? I mean, this should happen within a week or 10 days. So. It's something, of course, is rotten to the core, and this is, and the original Waco, it's.
Yeah, somebody's asking here about that, Mark. They want to know your analysis of Waco 1.
Well, you had a friend of mine who was up for the Academy Award for his film Rules of Engagement, yeah? And that film put out, it's really interesting. This standoff, of course, everybody was watching for 51 days, and the night before, I liked meteorology, and I used to watch the Weather Channel, before I was going to bed, and I was there with my fiance, and I looked in the Waco section of Texas. They used to have the Michelin weather forecast and showed you where the high winds were the next day, and I saw the Waco section, and the winds were supposed to be like 35 to 50 miles an hour. And I was like, I turned to her just instinctively, and I said, they're going to light this place on fire tomorrow. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I don't know. I said, this is a wood structure, and it's going to go up in flames tomorrow, and you're going to see, and the winds are going to whip it, and she was like, come on, Mark. Anyway, of course, we know what happened the next day. And the whole thing, the Waco whole thing was, they sent, look, first of all, you can get this guy, he was going to town like, every week or 10 days. So if you wanted him, David Koresh, if you wanted him, you wait till he goes into town and you freaking get him. And you bring him in, if that's what you want to do. But you don't go and go to a compound there, and open fire. And by the way, on clear channels, so the guys inside knew with their scanners, they picked up exactly what they were doing. I mean, and then they set up the whole, a mile away or whatever it was, the TV cameras from one side, and what my friend's film, Waco Rules of Engagement, showed was that FLIR, they had a plane above shooting, looking down with infrared film. It's called FLIR film, and what they saw was the women and children running out the back. And what you saw, you see them running out, and you'd see boom, boom, 2 flashes, and the people go down. They had snipers in the back. When the women and children were running out, they would freaking take them down. So this is, I have problems with killing fellow Americans like this. I have problems, and talk about the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. This is when it was thrown out the window. This was the first salvo. And it was that general, what's his name, that let the tanks go in there. Oh God, he ran for president once. Anyway, the whole, what they used, the illegal, I mean, they started the fire, and they burnt the place down. They killed all of these people that didn't do anything, that were God-fearing people, and then they killed, nobody knows the exact amount of children. I forget, 17 or up to
17 or 22.
Yeah.
They're different. According to
Right,
Carl
yeah.
Kling, it was 17, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, I've heard up to 22, 24, whatever. It's just, when you start killing children, and when you start killing women and children running out the back by snipers, and it's, to me, all is lost. And it's just, if, these events are done on purpose, is what it comes down to. This is not an accident. This was a 51-day standoff that they were trying to peacefully, when they set their, by the way, I ran over the beginning of it, they set their own people up, the ATF and the FBI. They set their own people off with that first initial salvo going into, trying to get into Waco using gunfire. And I mean, how stupid can you possibly be doing it on open channels and knowing these people are that's one of the major reasons why they first were getting them. Wasn't it a UPS truck that had a shipment of bullets that opened up and it had their name on it? That was the supposedly excuse to go in and get this guy, and he's a bad guy, and he's doing underage girls and that type of thing, and all these demonic things they're trying to throw on this guy. Well, like getting bullets is a bad thing, but anyway, it's just they set their own people up, knowing that they would fire back. Of course, they're going to fire back when you're firing into their compound with women and children. Who the hell
I
wouldn't
saw
fire
the
back?
videos. They smuggled videos. A friend of mine was doing radio there in Dallas, and they smuggled out, somehow they got out a video taken inside of the living room. I'm not even going to call it a compound. It was a living room that with women, filled with women and children, and there were 50 caliber bullet holes in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And that really frustrated me. And David Koresh was never charged or arrested for child molestation. That didn't happen. And they could have picked him up at any time. And I've been there. This is a rural community. It wasn't Waco. It was Elk, Texas, a little community, farming community outside of Waco. And I believe that's probably, I've always told people, anytime a communist or a totalitarian regime takes over, they go after three classes of people in order. The first is the self-sufficient family farm, the basis of every civilization, and that's what Waco was, wasn't a compound.
Right, you're correct. Yep. Yeah, it's well, that's what they were calling it. Like I was trying to say, as that he's a bad guy, supposedly molesting young underage children. This is the type of propaganda that is put out. To let them get away with murder is what it comes down to, of innocent women and children and men in their compound. And what you're saying, right? The 50 caliber, what is that from? From going through the roof? I mean,
that was from the helicopters that were overflying the building.
Yep. It's and we saw this, and this is the best we can do after a 51-day standoff, is send in tanks and helicopters. So if this didn't wake people up, I mean, it woke me up.
Woke me up. I told my wife, sitting on our canal front home in Miami, I will never sit back and watch something like that happen on television again without trying to do something about it. That's why I did this radio show. This is why I do this radio show. That's why I have guests like you on.
Right. There's all these kind of things that wake people up. I remember, being a 12-year-old boy. I mean, I got woken up with John F. Kennedy's assassination at 5 years old, and Bobby Kennedy's assassination at 10 years old, and at 12 years old. I remember Kent State. I was like, oh damn, they have 21-year-old kids white kids firing at 21-year-old white kids. I said, oh, this is bad. And so there's these instances in that are, or for me it was John Lennon's assassination. That was the last straw. I said, okay, that's it for me.
Let's see, who was he killed by? Oh yeah, one of George Bush's buddies' sons.
Well, no, that was Hinckley. That was Reagan's assassination.
Okay.
and Hinckley, Hinckley, to set up your own good friend's son. It was a very strange hit on Reagan that day. And Hinckley's, by the way, his bullets probably didn't hit Reagan. He was Reagan seemed to be hit by a CIA disc, and they wanted to rush him to Bethesda, and the Reagan people were smart enough to say, no, we're going to George Washington University Hospital. We're not going to go to a military hospital, where, by the way, got Forrestal, our first Secretary of Defense, because he was against Israel, and all of a sudden Forrestal was locked up in Bethesda, and he took a 16-floor freaking jump, or push, and that was our first Secretary of Defense, Forrestal, and he was a halfway decent man back then, but you have this going on. All of these our whole lives, we've seen these worse and worse atrocities. Then you have, the 9/11. You have all of these. You have the Murrow building in Oklahoma City. Where it's just blatantly an inside job, and and they're saying some truck bomb did this. It's just.
I interviewed that. I took that personal too, because that was set up to counter what I had set up. I helped start the militias around the country according to the ADL and Southern Poverty Law, like that was some kind of bad thing. I did it in the governor's office, Governor Gary Johnson, who was a good guy, and it's
that's exactly what that was for. That was to stop.
They did it on the exact day, so when that date rolls around, we think of Oklahoma City and those poor children in the federal building that Timothy McVeigh, who may or may not be dead now, I think he's sitting on a beach in Saudi Arabia somewhere, personally.
Yeah, it's, that day also, I looked into that. I almost wrote a piece about that, but I didn't. But just all of the factual evidence around that, including the structure of the bomb, that it left different beams and trees in front of it, okay, but blew out things behind it. And there was a General what was his name? That came up with it. A general.
Benjamin Parton. General Benjamin Parton. He was on my radio show, and he brought up the fact that first of all, all the debris came out of the building. I even had the statement of the woman that some planted the C4 on the columns in the basement of the building, and Benjamin Parton said that kind of bomb, that truck could not have blown the building out and the debris out across the street. There was also a story that came up about some BATF agent, and there was no BATF agents in their office that day. Some BATF agent called into Dallas to tell them what kind of explosive they had used, because they had been practicing with the ANFO bombs and truck bombs and car bombs down at White Sands Missile Range. And it's a good thing he had done that, because he was able to call Dallas and tell them what kind of bomb it was. What a load of hooey that was.
It's and all the aftermath of it, and the covering up, the killing of that black policeman and other people, that guy in jail. I can't remember all the names anymore, but
Kenneth Trentadue, and his brother's still working on it. His brother's an attorney.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he still trying to? Yeah. It's just
Jesse Trentadue, I believe.
I remember.
Brother's name.
It's just all of these, our instances through our whole lives are that it's almost like they've done it piecemeal, and to take away, of course, our sovereignty, our freedoms. But as you began my piece, it's like we thought the Constitution was good. When I learned that it was written by 55 mostly white rich men, that probably around 40% of were Masons. It's sort of so. it behind, locked doors with armed guards, it sort of gets you to think. And of course, we supposedly just won the war, the Revolutionary War, 4 years before in 1783, really in 1781, but it didn't finalize till 1783. And then we're writing the Constitution in 1787, and we had perfectly good Articles of Confederation, which kept the power in the states. So what the Constitution really was bringing together a federal power, so they could take control. And so it was so bad that a few of the members there of the 55 said, no, we're not going to go along with this. We need, the Bill of Rights. So they had to tack on the Bill of Rights as because there was a few people there that actually didn't like what was happening. So it's, I'm sure, non-Masons. So it's this whole thing. It's like, you learn about the Masons and you see, like, well, who's the person that landed on the moon? I know I'm jumping around, but it's like Neil Armstrong. Okay, well, Neil Armstrong is a 33rd degree Mason, and Buzz Aldrin was there too, the second man on the moon. So and Buzz Aldrin brought out a Masonic flag on the moon. Nobody knows this, very few anyway. It's just, but you go, it tells you, when they give it to their 33rd degree Mason friends, the first person on the moon and the second person on the moon. This is not coincidence. This is people. By the way, people think that a lot of this stuff is just coincidence, and then you have the apologists for whatever. They bring out these apologists that say, oh, they didn't know, or it was a mistake, or whatever kind of limited hangout they want to shove down people's throats. They bring out their horror media, their prostitutes, and which has been owned forever. Like we said earlier, the New York Times, it's Churchill's mother, who was Jewish, Jerome. That's where Jerome Avenue in the Bronx is from. They were part owners of the New York Times back then. So they realized that you have to get to the major ways of communication, which back then were first the newspapers.
And by the way, the Rothschild in my book Mystery of Babylon, I've got the history of the Rothschilds going back about 300 years. They bought Reuters News back in the 1800s.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, let me add this. You said, people think it's a coincidence, it's old. Now, Joseph McCarthy, you had mentioned Forstall earlier. There was a conversation. Okay, hang on here. There was a conversation between Joseph McCarthy and James Forstall before they threw him out of the 13th floor of the Bethesda Naval Hospital. And he said something about the communists being stupid, and Forstall disagreed with him. He said, consistency is not the mark of stupidity. If they were just stupid, occasionally they'd make a mistake in our favor.
Yeah, that's a great quote, by the way.
Now,
I haven't heard that in a while. I really like that one.
Let's go back 200 years to October 17th, 1781. Maybe that's 300 years. The Confessions of General Cornwallis. Now, you got to ask yourself, if we won the war, why did the British troops get to take all of their weapons home? Why did they get to go home at all? Why weren't they in a prisoner of war camp like Andersonville or something? But
I had a great dinner that night, right?
This Confession of General Cornwallis has been well hidden by historians. History books and textbooks have taught for years that when Cornwallis surrendered his army to General Washington, that American independence came and we lived happily ever after until the tribulations of the 20th century. Now, Jonathan Williams recorded in his Legions of Satan, 1781, that Cornwallis revealed to Washington that a holy war will now begin on America, and when it is ended, America will be supposedly the citadel of freedom, but her millions will unknowingly be loyal subjects of the crown. And again, on my shows many times, we've discussed our whole form of government. We've discussed the real 13th Amendment. We've discussed the role that lawyers play, many of them Jewish, and the lawyers themselves are agents of a foreign power. The British Accredited Registry has offices in the City of London right next door to the Rothschilds. And Cornwallis went on to say what would seem a contradiction. Your churches will be used to teach the Jews religion, and in less than 200 years, the whole nation will be working for divine world government. That government that they believe to be divine will be the British Empire. All religions will be permeated with Judaism without even being noticed by the masses, and they will all be under the invisible, all-seeing eye of the grand architect of masonry. And indeed, George Washington himself was a Mason, and he gave back through a false religion what he had won with his army. Cornwallis well knew that his military defeat was only the beginning of world catastrophe that would be universal, and that unrest would continue until mind control could be established through a false religion. What he predicted has come to pass, a brief sketch of American religion history, and we've seen Masonry infused into every church in America with their veiled Philaic religion. And go look at the cornerstone on your church. See if it isn't a pledge to some worshipful masters. Darby and the Plymouth Brethren brought a Jewish Christianity to America. Masons, Rutherford and Russell, started Jehovah's Witnesses. Judaism now is worldwide with their message of the divine kingdom. Mason Joseph Smith started Mormon Judaism and its Jewish teaching of millennialism. Millennialism is the belief that there will be a golden age of paradise on earth in which Christ will reign prior to the final judgment and future eternal state, the new heavens and the new earth. In fact, this will be the rule of the Masonic, Jewish, Illuminati bankers, fronted by the Luciferian Antichrist. Read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They plan to install Satan as the head of that. And I'm told here, I don't have one, so I can't confirm this. If you look at that eye above the pyramid, it's actually a reptilian eye. I don't know that. You can confirm that or not.
Well, I mean, you have, in 3 days' time, we're going to have the 200th year anniversary of Waterloo. And the story behind that is the Rothschilds, the Jews were kicked out of England in 1290. And there was like 18,000 of them. And they just finally had enough of them, as another 108 countries in the world has. And around almost 1,300 different locations have kicked the Jews out because, and sometimes, many times, numerous times, as Rome. But you have them coming back into England in the 1600s, in the mid-1600s, the late 1600s, and they helped form the Bank of England, the first bank, in 1694. But you have them and gaining more and more and more power. And these were the Jews, by the way, that got kicked out of Spain in 1492, that went up to Amsterdam and started the banking up in Amsterdam. And then, with William of Orange, they came over in England around the Cromwell time, and got a foothold in England for the first time since 1290. These same Jews, the banking Jews, and they got stronger and stronger, helped create the Bank of England, like I said, and the Rothschilds stepped in. And what happened in Waterloo was that the Rothschilds' messengers were better than Her Majesty's messengers. and they found out that the British won, but they played a game with the bonds and started selling bonds. And since they were already pretty much the leaders of the financial arena in London, people saw them selling the bonds and knew they had a great messengers, and said, "Oh my God, we lost Waterloo," and everybody started selling the bonds, and boom, and all of a sudden, when the bonds went down, they grabbed the bonds up and they more or less helped to buy England that day. Now, there's different stories about this, that didn't happen like that. It took a while to happen, and that it was gold and then all things, but they got control of England. And what then happened is, as I've mentioned before in your show, there's this saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, it wasn't a British Empire. It was a Jewish empire. And it was a rape and pillage. They used the British, mostly Navy at the time, and Army, as mercenaries, as they do with us now. We become the de facto mercenaries since 1897. We took over from the British. Therefore, you see this in our First World War, which was really the Spanish-American War, with the false flag incident in Havana's harbor, the USS Maine. Remember the Maine? So, but you have these people taking control by very devious methods, of course, and this is the Jewish financiers' modus operandi. For when I was doing my research on Holocaust revisionism, and when I started, more than half of that page, the almost 200 pages, is a 3,300 year history of the Jews. And I, like I said earlier on this show, I believe, I'm pretty good in history the last 125 years. But I didn't realize the total history of these people, and especially in Rome, the whole Roman thing. I mean, Rome went into Jerusalem, and in 70 AD and killed hundreds of thousands of them. They wanted to wipe every one of them out, and did the same thing again. I believe it was in 115 AD. To the Jews, because the Jews kept on coming back and sneaking their way into Rome and gaining power. And so anyway, it's just, but this is a story, and people say, oh, you're railing against the Jews. I said, no, I just call a spade, and it just happens to be that these people do this kind of thing. It's like, so you see, I mean, because I've seen my own history, I see, like, who assassinated John Kennedy, okay? Who did 9/11? These are two major milestones in the history of my lifetime that I know. That, I mean, I did 2 years of investigation on 9/11. I wrote the timeline of the day, the stand down of the day. You have these people. I mean, who bought the buildings exactly 8 weeks before? It was a Zionist Jew named Silverstein who brags that he had Sunday night conversations with Bibi Netanyahu, and he just happened to have a dermatologist appointment that day, and his daughter and son just happened to be caught up in traffic that day. They weren't at the Windows of the World like they were for the meetings that they had every morning at Windows of the World. So, all these coincidences, and 8 weeks is just the perfect amount of time to rig those buildings, huh? And so you have...
Now, there's also the possibility that the buildings were already rigged, at least partially, because if they tilted in a hurricane or something like that, if there was an earthquake and they started to fall, I've been told that they had explosive planted in the building when they were built, so they could bring them down straight and without damaging property.
Exactly.
And let's see, who was the Port Authority after they found out, and this was in my last March issue of 2004, with the building number 7 on the cover. They had an engineering team in there for 10 years that determined that the buildings couldn't be salvaged. They couldn't build scaffolding that high, and the only thing they could is take them down.
Right. Yeah, they had asbestos problems, and I mean, I went to the oldest Catholic high school in the United States, and it was LaSalle Academy on 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street, and I was on the track team. I ran by those buildings twice, 3 times a week, watching them being built in the early 70s. So, and they were built by the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, which was pretty much, from what I've known, it was a Rockefeller incarnation to help revitalize downtown New York. And so but you know, you find it in all 3 pits, by the way. You know, when people say, well, I talk about, you know, the Jews, well, you talk about the physical evidence. You know, it's like, well, there was molten steel found in all 3 pits, and it takes, I believe, 2,754 degrees Fahrenheit to melt steel. How did that happen? You know, so when these, you know, and no steel structures, skyscrapers have ever fallen because of fire. And then we see, what, 2 or 3 of them since in the 13, 14 years since 9/11. The one in Madrid that was lit up for 24 hours, and the other one in Malaysia, I forget where it was. And so it's like God is telling you, you know, showing the American people, look, it doesn't happen. And yet, of course, it happens to not 1, not 2, but 3 buildings.
What about the idea, according to that's been put out by Gordon Duff, who I'm not particularly pleased with at the moment, because he's attacking Texas and the whole Republic of Texas movement, among other things. But that's, you know, that's just because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Texan, and I don't hate people from Louisiana or from New Mexico or Oklahoma, unless of course they refer to us as Baja, Oklahoma. Then we got to fight. But you know, it's
yeah, it's just, you know, it's number 50, by the way, on my American exceptionalism is we're number 1 in creating false flag events, and I say, you know, for the last 116 years, the United States has been number 1 in creating false flag events to start wars, which have killed well over 100 million people. And, you know, I go on to say, I must say that this has always been done quite nefariously and covertly by our cunningly benevolent Jewish overlords, using their control of finance, newspaper, magazines, motion pictures, radio, television, and now they control 95+% of the matrix. And I say, you know, and I list them, remember the Maine, the RMS Lusitania in 1915, Pearl Harbor 41, Gulf of Tonkin 64, U.S. Liberty 67, invasion of Grenada 83, invasion of Panama 89, the 312 babies slaughtered in their incubators 1991, the Oklahoma City in 95, attack on America, the 9/11. The weapons of mass destruction 2003. Libya is attacking its own people 2011. Iran is going to get the bomb that's ongoing. Syria has used chemical weapons against its own people 2013. So you have all of these, and the last 2 haven't worked yet. The Libya, I mean not Libya, but
Syria.
The Syria and the chemical weapons, of course, Assad wouldn't be stupid enough to do that. And it was found out by MIT and others that no, he didn't. It was impossible for him to have done this. And of course, you know, the UN chemical inspectors came that day, that very morning that supposedly happened. I mean, and the frenzy, and you had Kerry and everybody. And where is Kerry? Has anybody seen John Kerry?
Yeah, I just took a picture of him off. He's walking out of the hospital with a broken leg.
Okay. Oh, there's a picture of him walking out. Good.
Yeah, there was. I didn't like the looks of him on my Facebook, so I took him off. But they did get a picture of him walking out of the hospital in New York.
Boston, I believe.
Yeah, or Boston.
Yeah, it's there's another good Irish Catholic that didn't know he was Jewish. So it's you know, interesting, and that's like, you know, Madeleine Albright, another Secretary of State that didn't know she was Jewish. I find these things sort of rather interesting and coincidental that 2 Secretaries of State didn't know they were Jewish. until more or less they became Secretary of State, and it seeped out through, people like us researching and finding their backgrounds and this kind of thing. And now we have another Secretary of State that laughed when we killed Gaddafi. We came, we saw, we killed. When she was talking to that Jew Leslie Stahl in 60 Minutes with her maniacal laugh about Colonel Gaddafi, who, as far as I know, was really good to like 98, 99% of the Libyan people.
Oh,
gave
yeah.
them free, gave them free, free education. Was building the biggest water system in the world, the irrigation system, which we blew up. But the way we got him, and I've mentioned this before to you, there's this holiday called Purim from the book of Esther with the Jews, and it's about revenge and the highway of death, which you have which I mentioned just before, the 312 babies slaughtered in their incubators got it started. That whole PR thing with the Kuwaiti's ambassador's daughter actually saying this is to a joint session of the House and Congress, and that and $15 million to Hill and Knowlton, the best PR firm in Washington, to spread this story, and that got 6 senators to vote for the War Powers Act and blah 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 blah. But you had our ambassador on April 2nd, 1990, April Gillespie, saying when they said, hey, Kuwait slant drilling, this is Iraq saying to our ambassador, hey, Kuwait's been slant drilling, we've had enough of this, and she goes, well, that's none of our business. And so they went into Kuwait and wanted to stop it anyway. So which is theirs anyway, really, but it was broken up. So all these games, but you have the highway of death. These guys, pretty much with white flags going back to Iraq, and we took them out. This happened on Purim, the Jewish holiday of killing and revenge from the Book of Esther, and then you fast forward, and a lot of things happened on this holiday of Purim, which is like our Easter that floats between mid to late February and mid to late March. And you had the first bombing of Gulf War II happened on Purim. And then I remember 4 years ago in January of 2011, I believe it was, where the UN was saying, oh, we're thinking about we're going to vote on a no-fly zone over Libya. And I said, they're going to drop the first bomb on Libya on Purim. And, people that I said this to said, what are you talking about? And sure enough, the first bomb that was dropped on Libya was on Purim. So you have the Jews telling you who's running the show by these kind of actions. And this is not the only one. That Jew that was a settler went into the mosque, and with machine gun 29 Muslims praying. That happened on Purim. So, and you have supposedly the poisoning of Stalin back in, I believe, 1953. He was poisoned on Purim, but he took a few days for him to die, and that's unconfirmed. But there's many stories about that's exactly what happened to Stalin.
I just saw this quote here. Once man gives over to false religion, he is no longer rational, because he originates no thought. His life is controlled by whomever controls his religion. The veil of false religion is the sword of Damocles, and its power to control humanity defies even the imagination of tyrants who use it. I have said on the show many times, if you refer to yourself as a Judeo-Christian, you might as well say, I'm a satanic Christian, thanks.
Yeah, it's, you have this Babylonian Talmud that is, I mean, it's only been in the last 10 years that I have realized to the full extent that it is a very satanic and a very supremacist way that they live their lives. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see what they're doing in Israel. It's not like apartheid. It's supremacy. It's much worse than apartheid.
Now, what we're talking about, as far as the Cornwallis thing is not to say that George Washington was a traitor willingly or knowingly. He was beguiled into a satanic religious order that insidiously controls men's minds. So have American statesmen and military leaders throughout the years given aid and allegiance to the enemies of the United States because they did not have the knowledge of the invisible subterfuge which stalks this land.
Yes, you have this. I believe that the Freemasons were taken over by these Jewish influences. I mean, it happened, out of the Knights Templars, and which has a direct relationship with the Freemasons. But this was taken, the Bavarian Illuminati and the whole May 1st, 1776, and the messenger that got caught, with the plans, that got struck by lightning and almost derailed their whole plans. But and what you said just now, about the learned elders of Zion, there's just so many things. It's like when I learned about Henry Ford and his International Jew, and his Dearborn Independent newspaper, and how here's this guy that was quite revolutionary in being pretty damn good to the American worker, giving them a fair wage back in the day, in many respects, and he was demonized beyond belief throughout history now because of his so-called anti-Semitism, and also his Hitler sort of having a liaison with the Third Reich, and as well as people like Charles Lindbergh, who also was rallying before World War II, that says we don't need the Jews' wars and this kind of thing. And let us not forget that it was, you talked about Germany earlier. It's anybody that wants to know just has to look up March 24th, 1933, and take a look at the world headline that day. World Judea declares war on Germany. Jews of the world unite and boycott Germany. Okay, this is like boycotting and the sanctions of this ongoing modus operandi for how you get to them. Now there's euphemisms of no-fly zones, of pretty much the same type of operational ways to get in, and other ways for war, to start wars, surreptitiously and covertly, but in your face, really. But if they just use euphemisms and different words, like you were saying earlier, the Bolsheviks, the communists, the Jews. So they go under many guises, and people don't know that, what you were bringing up either, that it's substantiated now beyond a doubt that tens of millions, Alexander Solzhenitsyn says, I believe 66 million, some people say more, got taken out by when the Jews finally overthrew the Tsar Nicholas in the Tsar in the fall, October of 1917. They tried in 1905. They tried earlier in 1917, and they finally got hold in the
back that far, 1905. They were advertising in the New York Times for raising money for those 6 million Jews that were threatened in the Ukraine. And you mentioned Alexander Solzhenitsyn at the top of my webpage on the left-hand side, above all my shows. I've got Alexander Solzhenitsyn saying, you must understand the leading Bolsheviks who took over Russia were not Russians. They hated Russians. They hated Christians, driven by ethnic hatred. They tortured and slaughtered millions of Russians without a shred of human remorse. It cannot be overstated. Bolshevism committed the greatest human slaughter of all time. The fact that most of the world is ignorant and uncaring about this enormous crime is proof that the global media is in the hands of the perpetrators. And I said, right below that, they call them Zionists or neocons today. They hate Americans of all colors, especially whites.
Yeah, because we've been the people throughout history that have fought back against them and their power structure, and we're the people that in these 1,300 places, 109 countries plus, that threw them out, and it's taken, this is it's and these people don't learn. This is the thing that people should understand, is that they're always the victim. They play the victim card extremely well, extremely well. It's like my sister told me an expression. They slap you in the face and they say, "Why did you hurt my hand?" This is the kind of perverse logic, and it's just. But we are that's I have nothing against people from other countries. Matter of fact, as I've told you before, I was brought up in Elmhurst, Queens, New York City, which is the most ethnically diverse neighborhood on earth. And I pretty much got along with everybody, except when I was getting into 12, 13, 14, 15, I start running across male Jews in every now and then, and I kept on seeing the way they acted was very supremacist like, and I didn't understand it. I just said, like, what's the matter with them or him? Because it was always a more isolated incident that I would see the type of behavior that was just uncommon for anyone else. And like I said, I was brought up in the melting pot of all melting pots on this planet. And I have nothing against people from all countries, except the Jews are doing it on purpose. The whole immigration thing, just as the whole homosexual card. I have nothing. Whatever people want to do, consenting adults behind closed doors, fine. But when you start pushing the agenda, this is done as a destabilization. It's to break up the family. I mean, the family unit's been broken up for getting the women to work, and then a homosexual card. And once you can get women, by the way, to abort their own children. Okay, so and in this country now we have approximately 60 million abortions since Roe versus Wade in '73. And when you can get women to do that, you have a major problem. I mean, a major problem. And so this is another way to destabilize the family unit and to destabilize and the whole schooling system. I mean, it's nothing but indoctrination. And I went to very good schools, and still I never liked it. I never liked it, and I always thought there was something wrong. And I was like the troublemaker. I was quite bright, and I would ask troublesome questions, which, I remember, like, when I was in high school in LaSalle Academy, like I said, the oldest Catholic high school in the country, and I asked in theology class, I said, well, brother, I remember it was Brother Andrew, an older Christian brother, and I said, Brother Andrew, well, you're telling us where, Jesus was, up to 13 years old and after 30 years old, but where was he between 13 and 30? And he went off on me. Only you would ask that question, Mr. Elsis. And no. And I said, well, we just answered the question. And he got very pissed off. Anyway, it's like, and Jesus, you go back to Jesus and the story, not only, Jesus at the end of his 3.5-year ministry went into the temple, and everybody, knows the story, but he went into the temple and, of course, called these people the money changers. And within 5 days of calling these people out in the temple and calling them what they were, he was nailed to a cross by them. So
now let me ask you. Let me stop you real quick here. because I have a real problem with this. Why is our religion, especially the Catholic religion, a religion where your priests are generally and often pedophiles, why would we make the instrument of torture that killed our Messiah, that killed our so-called Savior, why would we make that the center of our religion? I won't wear a cross.
Either will I, and you're right. Matter of fact, I don't know if I've ever brought this up on an interview, or maybe I have once, but I came up with this, what you just said 3 years ago. I said that, it was an offshoot of a comedian, Bill Hicks, saying the same thing. And he said, if John Kennedy, this is when Jacqueline Kennedy was still living, and he goes, people walked up to Jacqueline Kennedy and said, if we were all wearing rifle pendants, and just said, oh, we're thinking of Jack, to Jacqueline, it's like, and he was making fun of us wearing crosses, and it hit me like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, when I was doing some research on the resurrection, which I never believed the story until. And I'm not going to try to get into religion because I'm not very religious, and I don't like what the Catholic Church has done. And what you're saying about the priests and the whole pedophile thing, I don't think it's most priests. And the priests, by the way, used to be able to marry in the Catholic Church until the 10th or 11th century, somewhere in there. And it was done for freaking monetary reasons and land passage on of land reasons in the Catholic Church. And so this is it's something new, and I believe that the priest should be able to marry, and so you don't have that type of thing. But that's been going on forever. I mean, all the way back to the Greek days and that whole thing. But so it's just, but you're correct, and I think that symbol. I think the Jews are laughing hysterically that we killed your Messiah, and that's all you do is wear the cross of where we put him on. I think it's extremely a bad symbol, extremely bad. And I think the symbol that should be used, which is what I was trying to create, by the way, I had an artist, and I might still do this, is that create a new symbol for Catholicism and Christianity instead of the cross, and many times Jesus on the cross. But I was going to create a symbol about the resurrection, and the symbol was more or less the rock moved 2/3 of the way out, and you see into the where Jesus was and the whole thing, and him sort of coming out in the spirit form, and I had that vision of that being the new symbol, that instead of him dying on the cross symbol, you have him resurrecting symbol. And I'm a very mathematical, scientific person, so I believe that Jesus was put on the cross and that kind of thing with my whole good Catholicism upbringing. But it was the fact that I had a hard time for him coming back and the whole resurrection. And he came back 6 different times to his disciples and to many large groups of people in the 40 days after his death. And Thomas, touched him and all that, but the thing that there was a lot of things that got me. I did a lot of research on this, and it was the thing that got me big time was that pretty much all of his disciples were very, very fearful because they thought they were going to get killed, and they turned from being really, really, really fearful men to all of them dying and becoming the strongest men in the world type of thing to back Jesus and what he said. So you don't have that change in men, like an overnight change. This does not happen unless they saw somebody dead rise up type of thing. And so that was, I'm not going to get into too much. I've said enough on that. But
well, let me say something about Jesus. He also told us that You can do what I do and more. So I believe at the Council of Nicaea, they tried to kick him up to the rank of God to remove him from the ambitions of men like you and I. And
yeah,
you know,
you're right. They changed. They threw out how many books at that council? The 325 A.D. I believe, right? They remanufactured Christianity at that council. This is. I mean,
well, what about your Pauline Christianity? Just out of curiosity, let me ask you that.
Yeah.
Be a good slave. Don't rebel against your master, said Saul, the Pharisee. And I'm not sure if that was before or after he changed his name to Paul, the Apostle. Now, I probably, as a matter of fact, Tex Mars still won't talk to me because I brought that up.
It's you know, I try to stay away from the. I almost think that it was remanufactured by Judaism into, and we know this with the Scofield Bible later on, much later on. That, but what you brought up, that in 325 A.D. that they manufactured at that point, when it just became the church religion for Rome in what 312, 313. So you had them then wanting to create it for their own purposes, which, you know, Orthodox religion is like opium for the masses, is what it is. And it's I go back to just trying to be the best person you can be. I believe, you know, what Jesus did was just trying to show you that you, and I believe he was a real like rebel. He would probably be called a terrorist now, and because he spoke out against injustice and for people that had no voice. And so, you know, if Jesus was around today, he would be a terrorist, and that's what he would be labeled. So it's, but the manipulation of religion, you know, in Islam, and it's just in the terrorist section of the Islamic faith, which are in Saudi Arabia in the royal family, which was started by Jews a few hundred years ago. So
the Saudi family is Jewish and descended from Jews. I think you.
Yes, and this is why you see them working together with so-called ISIS. Isn't it funny that this radical sect of Islam never attacks Israel?
Well, let's see, the original name, or another name for ISIS, if you want to stretch it out there, is the Israeli Secret Intelligence
Service. Yeah, that's why they changed the name. People caught on to it, and they went to ISIL.
Yeah.
I got that. Yeah, when I found that out, I was like, I was laughing hysterically. Very few things get me, you know, and those all those wonderfully fake beheadings, where nobody runs for their life and squirms and gets cut off right before it happens, and it's just, and now you see that, you know, I mean, when these guys were traveling down in their long convoy, I forget what it was, 2 years ago or whatever, in all new Toyota things and all these munitions and all, where did they get? We could have taken them out right then, you know. So this is, of course, this is all destabilization. That's what it's for. I mean, look at Libya. Look at anywhere where we bring democracy, our so-called humanitarian aid or democracy. It's not anything of the such. It's the exact opposite. I mean, it's the same thing. What I was saying with the sun never sets on the British Empire. The Rothschild, the Jew financiers that own England, used them as mercenaries to go rape and pillage and steal the resources, enslave the labor of every country in the world. That's why we have our army now, the United States, in over 150 countries. So it's and we own the rest of these people, and if you don't go along with us, we'll kill you. It's that simple.
Well, let's see. How did Benjamin Franklin put it? Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing we've been brainwashed to believe. Exactly, that democracy is, or what did Churchill say? It's the best of the worst governmental thing, but we've been led to believe that that democracy is the best form of government, and look where that's got us. It's got us to Jeb Bush is supposed to announce his presidency today, I believe. So you have and Hillary Clinton gave a major speech yesterday, her first really major speech on Randall's Island, where I ran many races. It's an island between Manhattan and Queens. And so you have, Hillary Clinton, who's going to be the nominee, and Jeb Bush, who's
wow, what a choice,
going to be the nominee. Yeah, once again, you have...
That's almost as bad as McCain and Obama.
Yeah, McCain, there's a character. How nice of him. He's a graduate of Annapolis, 1958, and out of the 897 graduates that year, he was 894. And the whole thing about McCain and his stepfather and that whole thing is, maybe I've told this story once before, but it's an interesting story. He married his second wife, who was the Anheuser-Busch, the fifth largest distributorship in the United States. And where did her father get that money? Well, her father, McCain's second wife's father, worked for the Jewish mafia of Arizona, and took the fall for them in, I believe it was 47, 48. He took the hit and took the fall, became the fall guy, went to jail for a little while, and got out, and then was going to take another fall, I think in 52, 53. And he had a young lawyer that represented him and got him off. The young lawyer's name was William Rehnquist. So the future Supreme Court Justice of the United States was a Jew mafia lawyer. That sort of says everything.
Well, what about Al Capone's capo? He was Jewish also. Al Capone went to jail, but Meyer Lansky didn't do any time.
Well, yeah, Meyer Lansky was the head of the mafia. It wasn't Capone. Capone was just head of the, he was an underling in Chicago. I mean, he was the head of Chicago mob. It was, and that's the whole thing about we've been deceived too. And I brought this up on a few different shows. You take a look at the Warren Beatty, the film Bugsy, and you see when they're deciding if they should kill Bugsy or not, and you see it's who's at the head of the table of the mafia, and it's not an Italian, it's Meyer Lansky, and so Lansky, you're right, he never. He went to Israel. He didn't get touched, and so and you see the first people in also Vegas, and the way they controlled it. But we're made to think because the films like The Godfather, it's just Italians. And yes, I'm brought up in New York. I know that there's a lot of Italians in the mafia, and whatever. And but once you then see the hierarchy of it, and then what happens after the fact and all these things, and the hit team like the Purple Gang, who were the enforcers back in the day, and they were all Jews and ruthless beyond belief. I mean, just like the Russian mafia that came over here and landed pretty much in Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, just quite a ruthless bunch of thugs. So it's this is who these people are, that and how they've gotten to be in power is that, once again, they go back, and if they can't intimidate you or blackmail you, or they'll just kill you, and they'll make it known. So they scare the bejesus out of anybody else that's going to try to stand up. And that's why, by the way, they're the head of the Homeland Security. That's why Homeland Security is there. It's an enforcement arm for the Jews. And look who is training our police forces.
Israel.
Since 9/11. Yeah. And look what the police forces are doing in this country.
Look at what happened at Waco, too.
Right, exactly.
That they are scared of us bikers because, A, when we form a club, we're organized. And we've got the power. They can't just break us. Somebody will bail us out if we get in trouble, if we get a hassle. And they're trying to paint us as criminals. They tried to paint me as a criminal. They put me in prison for smoking a joint that's legal in 20 states now if you bribe a doctor. Now, one of the things I just put up on my Facebook.
Yeah, it's still right.
I want you folks to take a look at is the hidden history of the incredibly evil Khazarian mafia. And folks, this isn't just a history lesson. This comes from Veterans Today. It's by Preston James and Mike Harris, talking about the history of the Khazarians, especially the Khazarian mafia, the world's largest organized crime syndicate that the Khazarian oligarchy morphed into by their development of Babylonian money magic, has been nearly completely excised from the history books. The present-day Khazarian mafia knows it cannot operate or exist without abject secrecy. Therefore, it spent a lot of money having its history excised from the history books in order to prevent citizens of the world from learning about its evil beyond imagination that empowers this world's largest organized crime cabal. It's been exceedingly difficult to reconstruct this secret hidden history, so please excuse any minor inaccuracies or errors that are unintentional due to the difficulty in digging out the true history of Khazaria and its mafia. And folks, I've also got a lot of that, 300 years of history and Mystery Babylon, the New World Order unveiled.
And let us bring up, since you're talking about these people, that 90+% of the Jews in Israel are not Semitic.
That's right.
So, they actually look down upon the Semitic Jews, which are probably around 7% of the Jews in Israel. They're almost like second-class citizens, these Jews, and the Sephardic and some Semites. And so you have them. I always found it, quite funny that they'll try to label you an anti-Semite when they themselves, of course, are not Semitic. So this is, but they don't think anybody, most, you ask 100 people out in the street, nobody knows this, because and that's the thing, them owning 95% of what I call the matrix. It's like we think we have free will. We don't, because everything that is being put out through their media, their matrix, is like a calculated game from their TV, their motion pictures. Like the motion pictures, I remember one of this film that I saw, Sergeant York, it was called, and this film, Gary Cooper, and it pissed me off when I first saw it many years ago. And I like Gary Cooper as an actor, and I was livid. And because here you had it was supposedly from World War I, a true story. You had this, like Hick, that was a great shot because he was just a hunter as a kid, and they drafted him into World War I, and he said, "I'm not going. I believe," he was a true Christian, "thou shalt not kill." And they got him, they finagled, using one of their words, finagled him into getting into the army. And of course, he saves the day, he saves his battalion or whatever, and he gets the Congressional Medal of Honor, and so he's the hero. And they put this forth. So this is, and then I found out who wrote this later on. It was a Jew that wrote it, that did some other work with the Holocaust and helping to promote that. So, but this, and it was funny, I was on a show earlier this month with Deanna, and I looked up, I said, oh, let me look up the date that was put out, Sergeant York. And that film was put out on September 27th, 1941, some 2 months before Pearl Harbor and us entering World War II. And I said to myself, things aren't, known beforehand. This is exactly what they do. This is exactly, because you have people that back in 41 was saying, no, I'm Christian, I'm not going to go kill. But then you have this unbelievably perfect story to get, the guy that didn't want to kill saves his whole battalion and gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. No. You see, it's good to kill, which is what the story is about. It's good to kill. And this is put out right before we enter World War II. Talk about conditioning. And this was a major motion picture with Gary Cooper. And so this kind of stuff never ends. It does. We don't recognize the full extent of our own conditioning. I mean, now it's like the film, John Carpenter's film, They Live. You put on the glasses and you can see the freaking evil. You can see the perps, the real perps. And he was trying to say Jews, but he didn't mention it. But that film, by the way, got thrown out very quickly. It was like, I believe it was the #1 film the first week it came out, or first 2 weeks it came out, and then they threw it away because they realized what it was actually saying. And it was just thrown out of the theaters. And so, but it's very, you put these, and I've had these glasses on now for more than a decade. And so I see things in a very clear way, as like you see, a commentator on news who's Jewish, like Leslie Stahl or whatever on 60 Minutes, and and they're interviewing somebody that's Jewish. Well, if Jews are just 2% of the United States population, so that's 1 in 50. So you have a 1 in 50 chance, and then times it by another 1 in 50 chance, and you get 1 in 2,500 chance. Then you have another person, and it turns into one, and soon the mathematical likelihood of this kind of thing happening, and you see, you see all the owners. You take a look at the Forbes 400 list, and you see just the new owners. You see, who owns Google? Who are the people that started Google? Who are the people that started Amazon? Who are the people that started eBay? What about this Tesla, this new electric car company? They're all Jews. Every one of them. So you think that, and then they portray themselves as either the victim, which they're unbelievable at, or else the saviors. And they are very, 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 very rarely shown in a bad light. They're never the terrorists. And what I said about the movie Bugsy, I don't know how that got through, because you don't see that. You don't see them being the head of the mafia ever in film. I think that's the only film that ever put that forth. And they didn't say that, but de facto you see, Meyer Lansky at the head of the table. And that was a Barry Levinson film with Beatty and his wife, Annette Bening. Anyway, and I don't know how that happens, but sometimes things slip through, I guess. But so you have it's going back to the beginning of our conversation here. They've instilled an apathy. It's so indoctrinated, so inculcated with apathy. You can't do anything. Oh, you can't. That's the whole thing.
I just want to keep my head below the radar. I just don't want to call attention to myself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and because if you do, you become the tinfoil hat guy. You become, the radical, the nut, and people know this. This is well known that's why one of the reasons people do not speak out, and they know all of this psychology. They know this. What was that early what was the name of the Ashar test, where they had 5 or 6 people in a room, and one of them and 5 out of the 6 were a part of the program, and they had the guy in the white suit showing you different size strips, and in the beginning they'd say the large one is the large one, and but then they said the medium one is the large one, and X amount of time, if all 4 or 5 people before you say that the large one is now the medium one, the person that doesn't know what's going on, is not in on it, tends to agree with the other people, because they don't want to be the one left out, the herd mentality, because they know they get ridiculed when you're out there alone. But you see, that's why me and you do what we do, because, by the way, part of what that test shows, that person agrees with you, it breaks the freaking the logjam. So this is why we do what we do, so people can learn the real history and the real truth of what is going on in this world, and so that we're not only the ones on the the guillotine, so to speak. We are here trying to disseminate the truth, because we still have our First Amendment rights in this country, and the internet in which to do this on. Since we, of course, that's why I foresaw 18 plus years ago that this was the last bastion, last chance that we have, was the internet, and that's why I created the largest network of internet sites in the world to try to put that out.
There's more to it than that, Mark. If they say, if it dawns on them, if it hits in, if it pops into their mind, well, maybe they're right. Maybe what Mark and Clay were saying today is right. And I tell people, don't believe everything I say. Don't believe anything I say. Check it out for yourself. Go back and read history. The only reason I'm able to do this show is that I have read history, and over the past 20-some-odd years or more, I've had some of the most intelligent writers, researchers in the world on my show. I've learned from them. But if it dawns in their minds that maybe they're right, what do you do then? Then you have to call attention to yourself. Then you have to stop being part of the consensus. You have to stand up. You have to say, hey, you need to listen to the show. You need to donate to the freeamerican.com. Go there and send a donation. They're right. They're right about what they say. We put it up on Facebook. Now I'm on Veterans Today. And I can tell you, folks, you know, I am fighting for the veterans. I am fighting for the bikers, because I am both. I am those, and this demonization of the bikers, that's a biker war. Bullshit. It's not a biker war. We don't shoot each other. We get along. That's why we have the Confederation of Clubs in Waco. That was a meeting to work together, and the police destroyed that.
Yeah, you know, Clayton, kudos to you, and even, you know, your website is like I've created, you know, hundreds and hundreds of websites, and I picked the names on purpose, and your name is excellent. I mean, the name of your website, freeamerican.com, it says it all, and really excellent name.
I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be the only one. I want you folks here, if you're within the range of my voice, if you're reading that website, I want you to join. I can only know that, and I can only do that if you make a donation. Go to freeamerican.com. You can also buy my magazines. You can buy my books. You can order my films. True Face of FEMA is very important, because 10 years ago, I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting, and it's happening right now. 10 years ago, I filmed this. In case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, an earthquake of sufficient magnitude along the New Madrid fault line, or an atomic attack, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. That is the true face of FEMA. And that's what they got planned for you folks. That's what I think Jade Helm is about. Mark,
Exactly.
thank you. We got links to your sites up there. Hope people support you, and look forward to having you back on when Jade Helm is in its full bloom here. God bless you all. See ya. Where are we going? Affordable care. Okay.